Good morning. You're watching the DMZ America podcast with me, Ted Rall, and Scott Stantis. Coming to you from the left, I'm editorial cartoonist Ted Rall.
And I am editorial cartoonist Scott Stantis, coming to you from the collapsing, corroded, doesn't know what the hell they are, right.
And joining us is Charles Lipson. Scott, you know Charles for many years. You want to
Charles is a good friend, but he's also a guy I greatly admire. Charles occupied the Peter B. Ritzma, not Ritzman, Ritzma seat, not at the University of Chicago, where he's currently the professor emeritus in political science. He's written extensively on international issues, although he's now writing for The Spectator and for Real Clear Politics on domestic politics. And he has done, if I may, Charles, there's no reason for me to be nice to you because I don't want anything. But Charles has done yeoman's work in terms of putting the Trump administration policies and practices into real world perspective, and kind of cuts through the bullshittery of, the hysterical, he's the best thing that ever happened, the greatest president ever, versus he's the worst president, he's a fascist, and he's Adolf Hitler, blah. He puts it in, and Charles, you've done something that it seems almost impossible, that you put Trump policies into a clear and concise and rational perspective. So good work.
Well, thank you. The check's in the mail, Scott. When you write about him, that poem, when all about you are losing their heads, yeah. But it's, I want to talk about a setting that I think has been too little discussed about all of this. And that is the overall coarseness of our politics now. When people come into the chamber wearing FU kind of buttons, and when they speak, Trump does it all the time, the opposing side does it all the time. You've heard me say my favorite quote. I heard this. I was talking to a senior lawyer in Israel a few years ago, and he said, I came home one day and my two daughters were fighting, and I asked them how this happened. And one of them looked at me and she said, it all started when Shira hit me back. And I think that's the essence of our politics today. And it's gotten coarser and coarser. And as it gets coarse, and the sense that people aren't the loyal opposition anymore, they're disloyal. And they're disloyal to our country, and they're a threat. And I can actually understand why people think that. But on the left, they just say constantly that Trump is Hitler. They say, or if they are more restrained, they just say, oh, he's a fascist, or he's completely authoritarian. And then on the other side, they say that the Democrats are not just sort of a democratic socialist. They say, and this is sometimes true, I think it's true of Mondami, that they're using democratic socialism as a cloak for something that's more extreme even than that. But it just seems like it's hard to have, it's not just that people don't meet in the middle, they can hardly discuss things with each other. You hear it, I see it in blogs, in short things on dating sites, where if people have different views about politics, they can no longer, go out on a date or something.
Yeah, I always point to the example, my wife and I, quick story, 1988, we're expecting our second child. Janine's water breaks the morning of the election of 88, Dukakis versus Bush. And we get her, driving her to the hospital. This is a true story. She insisted that we stop by the voting booth so she can cancel my vote. And
well, that's just wisdom. That's just wisdom, Scott.
True,
her ability to keep a rational head on her shoulder during that difficult period. I think we all feel that way about you, Scott.
Thanks, guys.
True.
But the other thing that's great was that we did get to the front of the line. So if you ever, just a little tweak there, just a little secret that if you want to get to the front of the voting line, just.
And how is little Dukakis doing?
Little Michael is just fine. Could you imagine for a moment? But then there's those of us who were left in the center who feel that Trump is authoritarian, if not fascist, and who also feels that the Democrats are probably hurtling towards communism. So, there's the happy
I wish
middle.
that were true, that second part.
Oh my God, Ted.
There's no evidence to support the latter, but plenty of evidence to support the former.
Ted, I have a different view, or a view that partly confirms what you're saying, but with a twist that you will probably disagree with, and I'd be interested to hear your view. I think almost everything that Trump has done that's been very strong use of the presidency is the product of a presidency that was created first by Franklin Roosevelt and then by Lyndon Johnson. That they created this large bureaucratic state. They did a lot to, if you think about the presidency prior to 1932 or prior to 1937, when the coercion of Franklin Roosevelt flipped the Supreme Court, which until then had been saying a lot of Roosevelt's policies were unconstitutional. And then he threatened to pack the court, and the court caved. And then what Lyndon Johnson did was do a lot to centralize power in Washington and within Washington in these large bureaucracies. What that long arc, and that was completed by Barack Obama with federalized healthcare. What none of them expected was a president with very different aims would take all of those instruments that they had created and use them for different purposes, and often purposes that contravene those of the people who created this strong centralized bureaucratic state. So I think that President Trump is very, very strong. And you may say that looks authoritarian, but almost everything that he's doing is using, I think within constitutional boundaries, almost always, using instruments of policy that were created by Democrats for more progressive aims.
Well, I mean, I think that the administrative state has been expanding under presidents of both parties. I think about, traditionally until fairly recently, the defense infrastructure has increased more under Republicans than Democrats, but not exclusively. And that's the biggest part of our federal defense, our spending dollar. And I think, in defense of people like Scott, I think there were people like Scott who saw this coming. If you create an infrastructure, someone's going to use it. You think about Donald Trump is abusing executive orders. I think most people would agree. Obama started, expanding that. Now, what Obama did looks like nothing, but at the time, it was a radical expansion. I think. I mean, I would definitely argue that Ronald Reagan his Republican Party, his presidency, has moved far to the right of where the Republican Party was, let's say, under Ronald Reagan. You're talking about reserving the right to, for example, kidnap a foreign leader without even bothering to talk to the American people about it, or saying we're going to go to war. We don't even need a casus belli. We're not even going to talk about that. Against a major country like Iran, it's not even something the president feels like he has to address the American people about.
That's a mistake.
It's massive.
That's a political mistake.
It is.
But we haven't declared war since December the 8th, 1941.
Right. That's right, and that's part of it. Yeah, I mean, obviously, the Congress has abdicated its war powers.
Oh, absolutely.
Really for 200 years steadily, and it's it's I mean, in terms of constitutional stuff. I mean, I don't even know where to start with Donald Trump, but just the other day, just Tuesday, he literally spoke directly. He looked right in the eyes of the members of the Supreme Court and said, I'm going to ignore what you said the Constitution says about my right to impose tariffs. I'm going to do what I want. And I guess that's okay.
Well, wait a minute. Stop for a second.
Please.
First, I'll make 2 points. The first is that I really thought that when President Obama attacked the Supreme Court members sitting right in front of him by just went directly after him, I thought that crossed a boundary. And once these boundaries are crossed, they're crossed. Secondly, what I've heard the Trump administration say on this, maybe you've heard differently, is that there are a number of tariff proposals, tariff instruments, I should say, that were not ruled illegal, that the president can turn to. Now, he can't turn to all of them right away. Some of them require comments and they take a while to impose. But I didn't hear him say that he would ignore a Supreme, nor has he ignored any Supreme Court ruling. I think what
actually he has. He's ignored Supreme Court rulings on some of the some of the deportations, where the Supreme Court issued an order for him not to deport certain people, and he did.
Maybe
anyway.
You're right about that, but the issue, I would say that the bigger issue right now on the courts, besides the fact that everything is litigated, is that almost everything has to go up to the Supreme Court because we have such different kinds of rulings depending. The first thing I want to know, I bet it's true for you too, Ted, when you see a ruling by a district court or an appellate court, you want to know who appointed those judges, right?
And that shouldn't matter.
Exactly.
But it does. And we know
it does. I mean, Scott, is that the first thing you look at when you see a ruling?
Oh, whenever I get stopped for a traffic violation, absolutely.
Yeah, and that is, do I have to take a breathalyzer?
Yeah, I mean, obviously,
Never do
if it's
that.
the Ninth Circuit in San Francisco, that's a different deal than what's coming out of New Orleans.
Or the one coming out of Atlanta. Charles, let me ask you, I mean, you've written extensively, your early career particularly was focused on international issues and trade. Yeah. Your view of tariffs, I mean, as a conservative myself, and a free marketeer first, I found tariffs to be horrific. And you look at the economics of the 19th century and they were stupid. They didn't work. They didn't do anything close to what the people who instigated, other than raise money for the federal government prior to the beginnings of the income tax. So, I mean, I'm dying to know, this is a long way to ask you a short question, your view of tariffs and the Trump tariffs. I know you've written about them, but I'm wondering for our listeners and viewers.
Well, in general, I'm a free trader. There are, however, there's the plus on the side that Trump has used, is that it really has induced a lot of inward investment in the United States. And that is possible, I think, in part because although we have higher labor costs, labor is becoming a less and less important part of any manufacturing process. They're so highly mechanized now. So that's one thing. The second thing I would say about these tariffs is that, as is often the case in Trump's negotiations, the fact that we don't know his real aim is actually a feature, not a glitch? Is he using higher tariffs in order to get them to lower their tariffs? Or does he want higher tariffs to create a kind of moat around the large US market? And it seems like there's been both. And I would finally, I guess, final point, I think dealing with China is completely different. That is, China is an adversary, a geopolitical adversary. And they have also used their ability to cut off crucial rare earths and so forth as leverage. So, I would say, but Trump has just gone crazy with the tariffs and crazy with the rationale, and the fact that the Supreme Court was the right on the Supreme Court split basically 3-3, right? I mean, it was a 6-3 decision, but that was possible only because the conservatives split. But that brings us to the final point. Trump is not a conservative.
No.
He's a right-wing populist. And that has split intellectual conservatives. It hasn't split the movement. The movement almost, I mean, there's a huge support for this kind of populism, but the old sort of, you're wearing an Eisenhower, Nixon actually expanded the federal bureaucracy as much as or more than Lyndon Johnson. Ted, when you talked about the federal government expanding during Republican era, and Scott, I think, mentioned it too, was basically, except for Reagan, all the Republicans until Donald Trump governed within this broad framework of the FDR-LBJ coalition. They didn't really try to break it.
No, I mean, look at George W. Bush created this completely unnecessary cabinet department, the Department of Homeland Security, that accomplished nothing. It did create a bunch of jobs. So I guess.
Well, we couldn't bring shampoo in. We had to take our shoes off to get on an airplane.
Right. Thank God for that. Charles, before we get to the main topic of today's show, because I'm dying to hear what you have to say about it, I want to just about the tariffs. I mean,
yeah,
I feel like one of the big changes here is, I was still shocked by what happened at the State of the Union, because there used to be a time when the Supreme Court ruled, presidents accepted the spirit as well as they didn't view the ruling as like something the way a corporate lawyer would, as like, let's find a workaround. Let's, let's figure out.
So you're saying there's a chance. Well, you remember that great line from the movies? I wouldn't date you 1 in a million times. And Jim Carrey says, so you say there's a chance.
Right. But I guess my point is that what you would like to see in a separation of powers is that was drawn up by a bunch of British gentlemen, is that, wouldn't it be nice if the president just said, okay, the court has told us they don't want us to issue tariffs without congressional approval. So let's do what the court is telling us to do. But instead, like, okay, well, we have some little weasel workaround. I mean, maybe you do have a weasel workaround, but that's not really the way the system's supposed to work when it's working well.
Well, I'm wondering if I could just jump in quickly, Ted.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if Trump didn't say the stuff you don't say out loud this time, because administrations have always looked at rulings that worked against major policy, and they behind the scenes they work and they come with workarounds. This isn't anything new.
The fact is, we have, and this is, I'm sad to say, bipartisan. What Ted is exactly right, or I'd say 3/4 right. You're right in saying that the first statement that comes out of a president's mouth on a Supreme Court ruling is, while we disagree with the substance of the ruling, we respect the court and we will abide by those rulings.
That's it.
The one quarter that I would disagree with is if you can find a workaround that is consistent with the ruling itself,
Mhm.
that's fine.
Sure.
The court, the court didn't rule out all use of tariffs. It ruled out the particular ways that Trump was imposing them. And I'm saying that as somebody who doesn't particularly like tariffs. I do like the inward investments. I think that that'll be a very positive thing. I would say the bigger point that we should be thinking about here is that we're in the midst of, I think I would call it the third industrial revolution. People sometimes think of it as the fourth, but I think it's the third. The first one was what we all learned in middle school, that those spinning machines that made cotton into fabric.
The gin.
Okay, the cotton gins, exactly. Which had so many positive effects, and the pernicious effect that it prolonged slavery because it made cotton harvesting so much easier, and there was so much more demand for the cotton because of the new machinery. What's never mentioned, by the way, in all of those things that we learned.
By the way, some breaking news, gentlemen.
Yes. Yes.
Hillary Clinton has just testified that she doesn't remember ever having met Jeffrey Epstein at all, and that she has no information whatsoever about him.
So that's the way they're going to go. Okay,
I didn't see why she was pulled into it. Actually, I think there were a lot of things you could go after Hillary on. I didn't see anything about Jeffrey Epstein. With her husband. You know, that's a different. There was a line that Dennis Miller once said that marriage couldn't be more about convenience if there were a Slurpee machine at the end of the bed.
Wait, I gotta stop you there. Charles does one of the best Bill Clinton imitations around. Would you do just a little, please?
Oh, wow.
Well, my favorite line, Bill Clinton was a year or two ahead of me and on the other side of the Mississippi River from me. I mean, one of the amazing things about Clinton is, he was basically raised in Hot Springs, Arkansas, which was a den of gambling and all this stuff. But
women and liquor.
And he managed to say that he was from a small town near there, Hope. He was from the town of Hope. But I always said that I knew 20, 30 women in Arkansas who had not slept with Bill Clinton.
Are you sure? That seems like
but they may have been fibbing.
That may not be true.
But the second industrial revolution was the one that created big cities like Chicago. It was this heavy industry, steel and electricity and telephones, and then the moving assembly line that Henry Ford created. But what we are doing now is is AI and computerized intelligence, very mechanized factories with very few workers. And then I think we're on the cusp of yet another more major breakthroughs in medicine, where we understand where we understand the basic mechanisms in our body. I would say that this will make us much wealthier as a country, but it also creates a sense of uncertainty that everybody has about their jobs. If you were working for a newspaper 30 years ago,
what's a newspaper?
Your job was certain, mainly because I can remember talking with the people who ran the Tribune, and I'm sure you had similar discussions, both of you, with people at your various papers. Marshall Fields had nowhere else to advertise. Right? It had nowhere else to reach its market. And if you were trying to sell an old set of china, you had nowhere else to advertise except the want ads. I mean, except the classified ads.
Sure.
When that changed, there was a different way not only to get your news, there was a different way to reach your markets, your consumer markets. And that changed everything. And what happened to you guys in the newspaper business is what's happening to everybody now, right? I mean, if you work in almost any field, you're wondering what's the next thing, the next technological change that's going to disrupt me. If I'm a long distance truck driver, how much longer do we need a driver in these trucks for 2,000 miles?
As long as possible, as far as I'm concerned, because I do not like the idea of AI or auto driving.
Right. No, I completely understand.
Terrifying.
That. I know you want those illegal truck drivers that don't
not those guys.
Don't speak English.
No,
but
I'm on team right wing when it comes to that. I do not understand how there could be a non-U.S. citizen truck driver on an American highway. Do not understand.
Oh, I do. Living on the border, I totally saw.
Well, if they're from Mexico, that's totally not the same. If they're driving back to Mexico, that's not what I'm talking about. No,
they bring goods in from Mexico. So
I'm not talking about that.
I just want to say that I think that this when you hear people talking about being gloomy about the economy, even though we have unemployment under 4.5%, which is basically considered full employment, and we have wages that are now growing slightly faster than inflation.
Not that inflation. I mean, come on, Charles, you and I both know real inflation is like way higher than the official inflation rate. I mean, just the other day, the president was talking about bullshit core inflation, which isn't even a real thing. And
I would say bullshit has become incredibly cheap. That is something
you can get it here
we
for free.
Can't get enough of.
You can get it here for free from me and Scott. But I mean, it's inflation is definitely. I mean, the American people know that they're losing ground every single year. I mean, I think about, like, say, in New York City, the average apartment now rents for $5,000 a month. Okay, median apartment. When I first arrived in the 1980s, the average apartment rented for $1,000 a month. Now, I guarantee you, no one's income has increased fivefold on average since 1980 in this country. And you can just sit there, and that's housing is your biggest price. I mean, the point is, everybody knows the inflation rate is, and if you save your money in a savings account, you're getting like 0.4% interest. I mean, it's very, very hard for people to keep their head above water, much less being able to save for a rainy day.
Yeah. New York has an unusual housing market because so much of the housing is rent stabilized and so forth. And I don't know what the prices of rentals in
But Houston. You have similar problems all over the country, right? I mean,
I can tell. Yeah, no, I can tell you that rentals here in Birmingham, Alabama, which you think would be cheap, I think a 2-bedroom goes for $1,200 on average, $1,200 to $1,500 a month, which is given that we also have very much lower wages here,
much lower.
It does speak to an economy where people, I mean, here's the thing. Trump, I think, is trying what HW did back in the before the 92 election, which was, and he was right to say that the recession was shallow and we were coming out of it. And the numbers certainly pointed in that direction. And
Clinton, that turned out to be true. Yeah.
Yes. And Clinton rode that, the expansion, the economic expansion. But now people, I mean, you go to the store and you drop $110 and you have one bag of groceries. I mean, that's that kind of practical boots on the ground stuff that this president.
Scott, I always ask the person at the checkout counter, whether she's hearing complaints about prices. And I continue. I mean, it's just I just
Interesting.
routinely do it, and
Hmm.
they always say I'm still hearing a lot. And
Oh, I'm
then I
sure.
always ask if it's less than in the past, and they say usually some will say yes and some will say no. But you do. I mean, grocery prices are a big thing. I would say gas prices are also a big thing, and that's something I couldn't tell you what the price of eggs are. I really couldn't, and I buy them, right? But
Well, it depends on the kind of eggs, basically.
Well, and my
r-
son and daughter-in-law have chickens, so I don't know either. We have a lot of eggs. I could ship them to you, Charles.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure they'd arrive in perfect condition too.
there was a
Charles,
chicken shack across the street from me when I was growing up, and
Charles, let's talk about the
my
midterm
mother was
elections.
very sophisticated,
Mhm.
and I would come home literally covered in chicken shit. Many of my colleagues think that those days are not
Has
over.
it come-
And my mother just couldn't believe had raised this child. I was happy, just covered.
Charles, I got it. So you know, I know Scott sent you my column this week.
Yeah.
It would, and the question I asked was, you know, I basically stipulated that Trump would have some good reasons to cancel the midterm elections if he could. And to, you know, sort of go over it very briefly, his motivations are he turns 82 in 2 years. He'll be leaving office. He can't be pardoned or self-pardoned on the state charges that hang over him. He could face sentencing if, you know, theoretically at that time. So he has a personal risk there. It's easier, I think, to cancel a midterm election politically than a federal presidential election. It's the Constitution allows the Congress to shut down the federal court system. So it is possible for a president to declare a state of emergency, suspend an election, and you know, it's not like we've never had an election delayed or had, you know, for example, I know it's a city election. New York City's primary was supposed to happen on 9/11. It started, and then those assholes flew those planes into the buildings. The primary, you know, Mark Green would have been the mayor of New York City if that primary had taken place on time. But then the politics shifted dramatically, and instead of getting a liberal progressive, we ended up with Michael Bloomberg, who was endorsed by Rudy Giuliani, America's mayor. So elections can be delayed; they can be changed. You can also have them in the middle of a civil war. I guess my point is it theoretically possible that Donald Trump could figure out a way to cancel the midterm election or delay it indefinitely? You know, and how would that look?
Do you remember that early Saturday Night Live routine that was a parody of a show in which there was a conservative and a liberal that went at each other and Jane,
you ignorant slut.
Jane Curtin.
Yes, and Jane Curtin, and it was Dan Aykroyd. So Ted, you ignorant slut.
I'll take half of that.
It would be immediately overturned by the Supreme Court.
Even if they're not in session?
They would come back. There's just no way that
Martial
this would happen
law, no courts.
unless, well, if there were a 9/11 type event, then you know, the technical question about would be, there could also be a cyber attack that would shut down lots of our voting, and right-wing people are all over this idea that the 2020 election was stolen and that it was all done out of Venezuela and China and so forth. So there's a possibility, always a kind of remote possibility, but the idea that a dictatorial president, in order to preserve himself in power and without strong, you know, really, you know, civil war like situation that would prevent people from going to the polls, I just can't. I can't see it. I do think that the fact that smart, well-read, intelligent people, plus yourself, Ted, are worried about this is itself troubling. And I would say that your worries would be matched by people on the right were Barack Obama or Hillary Clinton in power now, right? I mean, in other words, the amount of distrust in the system is so high.
But okay, but assuming we do something very stupid, which is to take politicians at their word, Obama and other Democrats, Hillary Clinton never said they never made any comments about toying with the possibility of canceling an election or delaying an election or modifying an election. This president has repeatedly, starting in his first term, he said that, if he didn't win, he didn't win re-election, it would be because he'd been cheated out of it.
Right.
There's January 6th. Need to get into that. He ordered Texas gerrymandering at a time of, in the cycle when it normally wouldn't have happened, in order to try to put his thumb on the scale in the midterms this year. He's repeatedly said that perhaps the 2026 midterm elections should be canceled, shouldn't have them. Here you have a guy who's basically saying over and over, I'm not liking my polls, and I would love it if I didn't, would someone rid me of these troublesome elections? Right.
Yes. Well,
I mean, that's the difference here, right? I mean, so Republicans, Democrats are not paranoid if the guy who says he's out to get them might be out to get them. The Republicans were paranoid.
I think that this sense of exaggerated fear, I can understand why people have it. And I think it's kind of symmetrical. I really do. The
rhetoric out of Trump is unique. There's never been another mainstream political leader in our memories who's
I don't think
made
he's
rhetoric
emphasized
like
the canceling of elections. You may be able to find some things where he said he didn't wish he didn't have them and so forth. But
I can find you quotes where he said we should cancel these elections.
Yeah, but this is kind of, look, to me, the basic problem here, there are two problems. One is that the two sides are so deeply divided, and there's it seems like the old idea that you could sort of at the end come together to find reasonable solutions. It just doesn't happen much anymore. It doesn't happen because the people who do that risk losing in the primaries to their opponent. I mean, there's a logic to it. But I think the second thing that's kind of implicit in what you say and that I do agree with is that I think that a lot of our politics is governed by norms, by shared norms.
Mm-hmm.
And what we were talking about earlier about the Supreme Court was really, they rule against tariffs. Well, that's a ruling about a specific provision of a specific law. It mentioned a bunch of things, but it didn't mention tariffs. And so imposing tariffs under that law, there's no penumbra in that law. Remember, it was the penumbra that was the rationale for Roe versus Wade. It wasn't in the law, but we could make an inference about the penumbra. But what the clearest example of this was Franklin Roosevelt running for a third term, right? Mm-hmm. Since George Washington didn't run for a third term, resigned and went back to his farm, the idea was that 2 terms was the most anybody could serve. And that was, now, Franklin Roosevelt ran ran in the middle of World War II. Okay. And so those were unusual circumstances, but it was a norm. And then after he violated the norm, we passed a constitutional amendment. What's broken down in many cases are these norms that constrain people. You don't talk about canceling elections. I mean, even
Right.
if it's a casual.
Charles, you mentioned that the 22nd Amendment. Donald Trump has repeatedly floated the idea of running for a third term, despite the 22nd Amendment.
But I think a lot of times what he does is he throws out these things as a shiny object, and they send Ted Rall off the rails.
No, I'm aware that he's a troll.
Yeah.
But I think part of the problem here is that, and I do wish mainstream Republicans would recognize this. They like the fact that it's working and that it's funny, and it's owning the libs. But they're underestimating just how fucking toxic it is, and how it's degrading our discourse, and how it establishes.
That's what I started with, Ted. That's exactly what I started with.
And I agree with every word you said there. And
you're wise beyond your years,
establishing a precedent for some left-wing demagogue that they're not going to like to do the same thing in the future.
Well, we've had them for a long time. Huey Long. And so forth, but these were marginal figures. They were in one state or another.
Right. This is the president of the United States. It's not cool the way he talks.
Well, I actually agree with that. He is an entertainer, and it's dangerous. Everybody who talks with him, I've never met him or talked with him privately. People who talk with him privately say he's quite different. And one of the ways
I've met him. He is.
You
different.
have. Tell me about it.
He speaks in a very soft voice. He's normal. He's engaging.
He said that about you.
But that's sort of like a distinction without a difference, Charles.
No. But the other thing they say,
Adolf Hitler was very different in private too, Charles. I mean, Scott was just talking to me about this the other day.
About who?
Hitler. He was very different in private too. Who cares?
I think we all knew
Makes
that.
No difference.
What a great guy.
No.
But who cares? Hillary Clinton was apparently very engaging and very, like, if she could have run one-on-one and had scotch with every American voter, she'd be president today.
The thing I was thinking about Trump that is so different is that people say he actually likes people to come in on different sides of an argument. I think he hates that when it's public, when somebody does it publicly that's against him. But when he's trying to make a decision, like the decision that I'm sure you guys want to talk about Iran, he likes people coming into the office and he often will talk with people who are outside the mainstream. They're not, in other words, if you guys had come into the office because you just won an award for your editorial drawings, he might take you aside and say, what do you think about what we should do about Iran? He would, on the grounds that you're informed, you're not an expert like somebody from the Pentagon or somebody from the State Department, but you're well informed and it's worth hearing your views. And I understand he does a fair amount of that. That's different from wanting to hear that in public, and it's different from wanting.
And look, he appointed Tulsi Gabbard, who was, and RFK Jr., who were marginalized from the Democratic Party for being too far left, right? So, no, I hear that. And I'm not saying that Donald Trump doesn't have any appealing aspects to his personality or his governance. That's not my question. My question is, might he, to save his skin, Netanyahu style, come up with some pretext for canceling or indefinitely delaying the midterm elections? And what would it look like? I can easily see the court system being shut down over some pretext so that there's no way to go to. And also, was anyone willing, and who's going to stop him?
Well, first of all, I think that there are a lot of institutional barriers to changing this, and beginning with the fact that all these elections are held at the state level. But the courts would come in against it. I don't think that the military would enforce such a blatantly unconstitutional approach unless we were in the middle of something like a 9/11 in New York right at the moment.
He did dispatch the National Guard and federalize the National Guard for these immigration sweeps, which have not only impacted illegal immigrants, but also, U.S. citizens and green card holders.
Right. Well, the nationalization of the Guard, my understanding is where they've done more than protect federal buildings. He can't do that.
He used them as cops too, right? Like in DC.
No, they're really not using them as cops. And you can declare an emergency, but that has to be done by the state governor. And where the state governor hasn't done it, the courts have ruled that President Trump's attempt to do it was illegal, and those have been stood down. I would just say that we shouldn't lose sight of the fact that President Trump not only took a huge hit to his popularity over what's happened in Minneapolis, but he changed course. He didn't change course in a real public way, but he brought in Tom Homan, who is very different from the people who had been there. And then he didn't do it immediately, but within a couple of weeks, they had basically withdrawn the large overuse of the Guard and so forth there. So I think that on the hyperbole, I think that the problem is hyperbole. I think there was a difference between the way that J.D. Vance spoke about the economy the day after the State of the Union and the way that President Trump did. President Trump said it was the best thing ever. This was just the best thing ever. J.D. Vance said we had a large hill to climb, and I think we're near getting over the hump. And that's a very different.
But J.D. Vance isn't the president.
No. But I think that I think the big problem is that you don't win. The big problem is that you always lose the midterms if you're the party in power, unless it's something really extraordinary. Sure. And the midterms, to the extent that they have a chance, the Republicans in the midterms, it will depend on the economy. People aren't going to vote on foreign policy, but Trump's got a big decision on foreign policy that he has to make in the next week or so.
Well, the foreign policy problem is that the American people, and the polls reflect this. Mm-hmm. The American people think that the president does not care about them and is not focused on their problems. They elected this guy to do to secure the border, which, in fairness, and I hated him, Joe Biden had done before he left, right? Right before he left, right? And basically the border, that's accomplished. But they also elected him to do something about out of control prices and affordability. And there's no evidence whatsoever that the president has done anything about
both
that.
Both of those are wrong, Ted. Both of those are wrong.
Well, the
border was wide open for 3 years. In the final year, Biden half closed it. The difference after Trump took office is still quite dramatic. This issue which you've raised about whether or not the prices whether we have honest inflation data is something I'm just not technically equipped to speak about. My sense is that the big inflation was fueled by very heavy spending after the COVID crisis had ended. We knew that the COVID crisis had ended.
And a massive surge of pent-up consumer demand after the lockdown.
And Biden pushed through these two very large multi-trillion-dollar spending bills. And so the combination, it wasn't the worst inflation ever, as Trump said, but it was bad inflation.
But the point is that people are having a hard time finding jobs. They're having a really hard time finding good jobs. A lot of these problems are systemic and have been building over decades. And AI scares the shit out of people.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Yeah.
They're feeling really insecure, and they think they don't see a good future ahead, right, for themselves or for their children. People are nervous, not just Democrats, Republicans too. Things are expensive, and their wages are not going up, and they're worried about losing their jobs. This economy is creating anemic job growth. I mean, the point is the American people don't like this economy.
Well, wait a minute.
No question about it.
The job growth is really interesting. Net job growth has been fairly anemic, but private job growth has been okay. And the loss of jobs has been in the public sector.
Yeah,
I'm all for that.
I'm all for it if they're replaced by private sector jobs, which they have not been.
Well, the last one, I think there were something like 50 or 60,000. There were a couple of 100,000 increase in private sector jobs and 60 or 70,000 decrease in public sector jobs. I mean, it was not a bad number for the private sector. It wasn't a huge boom number. You need a big boom number in the private sector to make up for what's going on in the public sector. Well, that would be nice. I agree with.
Otherwise, we're all competing against these unemployed former public sector employees.
Well, and old newspaper guys. I agree with
the worst.
I agree with that. And academics, by the way, there's a crisis in academia. True. And who would like to be educated as a Ph.D. today in any field other than the sciences and maybe economics, right? I mean, you get a Ph.D. in poetry. I have friends who have that. I mean, you can write billboards.
There's always work at Hallmark.
I do think
the post office anymore either.
The other thing that's happening is this tremendous geographic shift, right? I mean, you would think in a knowledge economy that states like Massachusetts would be growing like gangbusters. They're not. They're growing at 0.5% a year and have been for a decade. Texas is growing at 4% a year. So, I mean, there's this huge geographic split. And that's something that's an advantage that America has that almost no other country has. You cannot move in France from a high tax region to a low tax region, or in England. And the whole idea of the European Union is to prevent any state from gaining an advantage over another nation state in terms of low taxes and low regulation. So it's both regulation and state. I mean, you go to, when you are in Chicago, it's just regulation after regulation and high taxes, and you're not getting services.
But at least in Europe, there's a social safety net. You're not going to fucking die on the street during a snowstorm the way you do in New York City. 18 people, right, in the snowstorm a couple of weeks ago froze to death. I mean, it's disgusting. But the point is, I would be, if I were Donald Trump, I'd be very nervous about the midterms. I mean, the House. Oh yeah. The House is gone. Now there's worries, probably overblown, but still worries about the Senate, GOP seat, the Texas Senate seat. John Cornyn versus Ken Paxton.
Oh, Paxton is a piece of. And
he's probably going to be the nominee. He is a piece of shit.
And Trump is, exactly. And if the Republicans the Democrats nominate their more moderate candidate, they really have a chance. Let me ask you a question, though, on the Democratic side, Ted. What do you make about the way that Spanberger looks to have shifted from the way that she campaigned to the way that she's governing?
Can you be more specific?
Well, she basically ran as a center left candidate, but as soon as she came in, she's moved pretty far to the left. She's wants she's reinstituted DEI. That'll of course be ruled illegal because it contravenes the Constitution. But she's done a number of things, and she looks, and I've seen it. She's not alone. You're seeing this in Michigan and so forth. These states that are purple states, where in the general election, Democrats have run as center-left candidates. As soon as they get in office, they seem to move to the left. And what's perplexing about that in Virginia is that you can't run for re-election as a governor in Virginia.
Well, that's right. She's you run one, you get one term, and that's it, right?
Right.
Look, she's running for vice president. That's what's happening here.
Okay.
And if you want to be in any party, you want to be the ideological attack dog to be the vice president. She won't be.
That's a good point.
Presidential nominee. I'm convinced that's what's happening, guys. I could not have planned this better. There is breaking news coming out of the out of the Washington Post, exclusive. I'm quoting this. Trump, seeking executive power over elections, is urged to declare emergency. Activists who say they are in coordination with the White House are circulating a draft executive order that would unlock extraordinary presidential power over voting. Now that's the headline and the subhead. I'll just read a couple paragraphs. Pro-Trump activists who say they are in coordination with the White House are circulating a 17-page draft executive order that claims China interfered in the 2020 election as a basis to declare a national emergency that would unlock extraordinary presidential power over voting. Trump has repeatedly previewed a plan to mandate voter ID and ban mail ballots in November's midterm elections, and the activists expect their draft will figure into Trump's promised executive order on the issue. The White House declined to elaborate on Trump's plans.
Well, I look forward to seeing that. I think that Trump wants to make voter ID and mail-in ballots a national issue, but
it's a misdirect too. Like, Americans think that voter ID is totally fair, but that's not the bill. Save America is a prove you're a U.S. citizen bill, not prove who you are bill. And those aren't the same.
Yeah, it kind of trips up women who have, they have to prove because they were born Sally Jones that they're now Sally Smith, and creates an issue there. It doesn't, but it's an 80%. It's an 80-20 issue in the Democrats
for voter ID.
Yes, are on the
voter ID, but don't you?
But that's not.
Doesn't your license show if you? Doesn't it have a star on it or something? If you,
star IDs now are pretty much the regalia across the United States.
Yeah, I mean,
really, we don't have one in New York, but
of course. But I mean,
Hey guys, listen. Before we're getting close to the end here, and Charles has wanted to touch on this, and I know I want to hear Ted as well. Briefly, war with Iran, or what the hell is going on there?
Here's what to look for.
Charles, go.
Here's what to look for. There is the USS Gerald R. Ford, and right now it's in Crete or the Greek Isles, somewhere like that. When it moves over toward Israel, its job basically is to be able to shoot into Iran, but also to help with the defense of Israel, which Iran will attack. When you see that, war is about to happen within as soon as they arrive on station.
Well, what does war look like? And more to the point, what does it accomplish?
Well, that's the $64,000 question. I think that the hard decision really is whether or not Trump wants to go for regime change. And the problem,
he can't.
There are two problems. One is regime change without putting boots on the ground is something that would be very difficult. And there is no way we're going to put boots on the ground.
Impossible.
And the second thing is that there is a well-armed support for the current regime, even though most people are against, in overwhelming numbers, are
That's
against
true.
the current regime, but they are not well armed. And the IRGC, the Revolutionary Guard, is a very large group there. The
And just because you hate your government doesn't mean you want to be invaded by the U.S.
Well, that's a great point, and I think that the idea is what the Trump administration would like to do. I think is come up with something like the post-Maduro solution
Right.
that they see
That's right.
happening in Venezuela, where they have maybe not the IRGC but the regular military take over. And they would like to see that gradually transition. Now, they may be wrong on both counts, right? This is a very risky piece of business, not because we won't win that war in the sense that we could take out we could fly continually over the country. We can take out a lot of their military resources, but every place that is a fixed location throughout the Middle East is subject to being hit, right? Our troops that can move around, or launching pads that can move around, those won't be hit. But where you have a base or whatever, and Israel will be attacked, of course. And then you will probably see terrorists activities across Europe and maybe in the United States. The more you see that, the more we will escalate. The Israelis will also escalate. But
well, this is for Israel.
Well, this is, I think, what you're seeing is a real shift in the way that Trump conceives American foreign policy, which is the first big change of the post-Cold War era, right? And the post-Cold War era is we no longer have to really hold back the Soviet Union. Russia is a much weaker threat, and to the extent that the Europeans want to hold back an expansionist Russia, they should pay for that. That's Trump's policy.
He's not wrong about that one.
The second policy is we'd like to have a stable Middle East where we don't have to spend a lot of treasure and resources and commit a lot of resources there. The best solution to that would be a favorable Iran in partnership with Israel.
Not going to happen.
It will only happen if there's regime change in Iran, because that was what it was before the 1979 revolution. By the way,
how would any Iranian government, it's hard to imagine, but a theoretical one that was willing to align itself with Iran, how would it be possible for it to not be overthrown domestically, given the fact that, Israel has turned itself into such an enemy of Iran by, bombing it?
Right. Well, because friends can become enemies and enemies become friends all the time on the international stage.
Yeah, what they will do, this would be my guess, if there is regime change there, what they would do is kind of what they've done with regard to Saudi Arabia, which is a friendly relationship, but not bring it up to the highest, most public level until the other side does so. By the way, the visit of Modi from India to Israel this week is a big deal.
It is,
and the partnership between Israel and India is a very big deal. They have a lot of complementary resources. What the U.S. would really like to do is move all of its military focus to the Far East.
Charles, that's all the time we have. Unfortunately, I could do
Yeah.
another hour, no problem. It's always so fun to talk to you. So great. Please come back soon.
I love it, and I hope you know that when I called you an ignorant slut, I didn't
I take
mean
that in the
It came from
I take
here.
it in the best possible way.
I didn't mean the slut part at all.
Oh no! Oh, that's too bad. All right,
because
well,
if you know Ted,
indeed. Thanks,
Good to
Charles.
talk to you guys. A lot of fun.
So great. Charles
Thanks,
Lipson,
Charles.
syndicated columnist and professor. Thank you very much for joining us. Scott, before I let you go and before we close out the show,
Yes.
what do you think about this breaking news from the Washington Post? I mean, the president looks likely he's seriously considering nationalizing the election. Speaking of shit that, is not in the Constitution, elections are run by states and cities.
Right.
What does this mean? I mean,
The national emergency powers are, I think, purposefully nebulous. So what does that mean the president can and cannot get away with? And as you've mentioned earlier, I'm not sure.
and
I
talk
wholly-
about a pretext: Chinese interference in the 2020
T20
election.
elections, right?
Blow me.
Yeah, well, and all of that has been shot. There's been absolutely no proof to corroborate that assertion. So let's begin with that. I wish Charles were still here because I'm not sure I totally agree with his confidence that the election cannot be canceled or significantly curtailed. My take is that you can go through excuse me for being crude in a way, but you can go through the back way here, and that is you have the election. But friendly governors across the states can say, you know what, there was obviously fraud here. We can't certify these results. Therefore, Congressman, Gibboni is going to stay in office. We're going to have a redo at some latter date. There's a lot of ways to finagle and fudge an election.
Well, especially,
but I just want to finish by saying this story from the Washington Post. Now, I want to know who these people are. I mean, it could be, because don't forget, there's a lot of, you and I both know, we've been involved in politics long enough to know there's a lot of, baloney heads who, beat their chest and say, I represent this wing of the Republican Party or this wing of the Democratic Party, make pronouncements. And then it turns out that they have no standing anywhere with anybody, and they're viewed with actually quite a lot of disdain from the party they claim to be speaking for. So let's see who's actually saying this first. But the fact that if the president has also said, this is something to consider, that is a terrifying and statement and a terrifying thing to consider, and one that we need to keep our eye on.
So here's the logic coming from Peter Titkin. He's a Florida attorney who went to school with Trump. He's a Florida lawyer. He's advocating for the executive order. Under the Constitution, he says, it's the legislatures and states that really control how a state conducts its elections, and the president doesn't have any power to do that. True. But here we have a situation where the president is aware that there are foreign interests that are interfering in our elections processes. That causes a national emergency where the president has to be able to deal with it. He says that he's had certain coordination with White House officials, but his input has successfully led to a presidential action before. He represents former Colorado County Clerk Tina Peters, who was jailed for breaking into voting equipment, whom Trump pardoned in December.
Of course he did.
Anyway, so
this is someone this is an inner circle guy.
Yeah,
this does have some credence. And so
lead story in the Washington Post, even as we speak, of all, overall big story. I mean, look, here's the thing. You can just see the sort of like, well, why would Republicans want to fuck with the election? Because they don't like the way the polls are looking, right?
No,
I mean, if they liked the way the polls were looking, they'd be leaving it just the way it was, right?
Oh, of course.
So they're coming in. So, you can easily see, you nationalize the elections somehow. Then the very same national emergency that you said justified doing that justifies, well, actually, we can't have them at all, right?
Right. This is something to keep an eye on. Let's track it. But it could be yet another way for this administration to do what it has kind of, toyed with in the past. So
100%.
you and I are both. I mean, are the elections going to go forward? I believe that they are.
Probably.
What percentage would you stick to it? Some folks say 50-50. I'd say 60-40 in favor of them happening.
55-45, just to be difficult.
But 40% is a pretty damn big number when you're
It is
talking
a
about something
big-
this important.
So perfectly said.
Okay, so
Thank you. And now it's time for the musical entertainment part of the show.
Yes.
Get ready, Scott, and away we go.
Charles Lipson. This is, oh, the yellow rose of Texas is the only rose for me. Hook 'em horns, gig 'em Aggies. Hey, Ted, how about them boys?
That was beautiful, Scott. Just
Thank you so
just
much.
absolutely gorgeous.